the eyes are about.
And what about this V stringer? Like, how is this? Like, what basically is different from a V stringer to a
Well,
normal
look,
stringer?
I played around with flex a hell of a lot through the years, and at one point in time, I was going back to the beginning of the story with epoxies. I've built quite a lot of epoxies. I was building quite a few in the 90s with the best materials at the time. And what you need to do usually is cook the stuff. Those early versions of the resin, I used to have a heat cabinet and I'd put it in there with a air heater and bring it up to about 50 degrees. You needed to cook the board once it was fully laminated.
Yeah.
So off and on through the years, I've played around with the latest generation of epoxies, and then I've kind of gone off and again for a while because, popular to contrary folklore, they are toxic. And also, want to turn that off?
Just a little bit, just because you're spitting some pretty good stuff right here. I want to get it.
Yeah, contrary to popular folklore, epoxy is toxic, and it's also, particularly all the early versions of it were really slow to work with. And so I'd tried the latest gear. I had some really successful boards, and then I'd sort of put it on the back burner, and then a few years later, when a new generation of materials came along, I'd have another run with it.
Yeah.
So at one point I was playing around with, from early on I was using flex tails, but I started going down this pathway of using a single stringer, a thin single stringer, so the board still had a certain amount of flex or bend in it, and I was using carbon fibre rails to control the actual flex pattern.
Yeah.
And so that's the key word, is control flex pattern. So as opposed to boards which have no stringer and they're using like a real thin piece of carbon on the rail, like certain brands, if you bend them, they still just bend in an uncontrolled fashion. And so what I've always been looking for is really rigid entry. I want the board to hold a really positive line and not flap and wobble through the front, and particularly not belly out in the middle, but I want flex in the back. So I went from using the carbons, which gave a particular type of pop, which was good, but then I had a light bulb moment and I went to wood, because one of my first jobs as a grommet was sanding. And also when we first started Outer Island surfboards in '69, I was the glue up kid, and I used to glue up all the stringers, often doing multiple stringers, 3 stringers,
like making blanks?
5 stringers, cutting the blanks and putting the stringers in.
Right.
So we'd buy all the blanks plain, no foam, no stringers, and I was the guy who cut them with a handsaw and glued the stringers in, often multiple stringers, so I was pretty versed in the art of doing stringers. So back then we used to occasionally do fancy ones which would come out to the pod on a diamond tail, stuff like that. And then I just had this idea of doing these V stringers, and initially I was bringing them out around here.
Yeah.
And the back end of the board, being unsupported by wood, would have a certain amount of natural flex in it. So I cottoned onto that, and then I started moving this exit point around. I had it up here and down there until I found that the optimum point is roughly between your feet. So what we're achieving here is rigidity in the entry of the board, so it holds a super clean line off your front foot, and you can front foot drive it and it don't bend, or minimal at least, and out through the back it has flex. So that's what it's about. And when it's glassed, it stiffens it up a lot, but it still holds the natural properties, which I could show you on a stringerless.
Your like main I feel like the main like characteristic you've had as a shaper throughout your career has been working with flex, hey? And you know, you've obviously known for your flex tails, and now with these V stringers, basically it's like you
just pick that one up for a second and hold it, and I'll show you what the V stringer is doing. It's super rigid through this area, and through the back here it's got flex.
Whoa.
So you can see what it's doing there. When it's glass, it stiffens up a lot, but it still holds that characteristic. So what we're getting is it's flex and what I call reflex, which is where it wants to return to its natural line. It's like a springboard. And it's giving you like a dolphin type of propulsion because it's on the horizontal, not on the vertical. And with my early flex tail boards as well, you couple this with the full carbon flex tail and the fins are in the flexible area. So the whole back end of it, it's not only bending, but it's twisting. That's what I call torque, which is the three-dimensional bend and twist. And that's kind of,
That is tech.
it's real signature feeling, and it's totally addictive. Since I first been trying it, I've been hooked on it.
I can't wait to try it.
But to answer your question, early on there was 3 of us involved in Outer Island. There was David Chidgey and Glenn Ritchie and myself, and Chidgey was Australia's answer to Nicky Dora. He was like a serious outlaw type. And Glenn was a real accomplished production shaper, and we started playing around with designs that were really out of the box, like around 68, 69. Boards were all roll bottom with kind of an egg rail and a serious S deck. That was mainstream, that's what everyone was riding. And we went in a completely different direction. We started doing dead flat bottoms with a curvature right through them and edges. And like no one was doing that at the time.
Yeah.
And then we started doing really deep concaves. We were riding boards that were 5'8" with like 3/4 of an inch concave through this area of the board, and hard edges out through the back. And they were really out of the box. They were super different to what anyone was riding.
Yeah. What year was that?
68, 69.
No way.
Yeah. There's still examples of those boards getting around.
That's
They
pretty ahead of the.
They were really revolutionary boards, and a lot of people, a lot of shapers took note because they could see, we were travelling across a wave twice as quick as anyone, just absolutely flying.
Do you think that hard edge creates speed?
Yeah, well, what it's about, the edge is just letting the water get away quickly. So if you run a hose off the bottom of this board, the water will come off in a sheet and exit the shape without creating drag. So whereas through the middle of the board, a round rail will
It'll kind of curve around the rail, right?
Yeah, the water flow will curve around, and suction is the wrong word, it'll kind of fit the wave face. And like a lot of good pipe boards, like the ones that Jerry used to ride, have a very little or no edge through here, and it's a particular type of rail form that fits the wave, and it can release, it can get down the face.
Yeah.
Where a super hard edge, you can sometimes get sucked up the face and pitched over with the lip.
Yeah.
In that part of the board.
For sure.
So the balance of forces and the kind of harmony of the different elements in a board is often what really determines a good board from an ordinary board, and it's that harmony of the different forces in a board which makes for a super board. And that's, with the shaper's eye, that's what I look for in other shapers' boards as well. And when I see one where everything is just in harmony and it's singing like a tuning fork, that's a really good board.
Yeah.
And so what I've been doing with this particular model is working with the subtleties. Instead of, as a designer, what I often do, like with all those early super deep concaves, super hard edges, I would take a design to its extreme and ride it and push how far it could go before I found a point where it would start to fail or reach its limitation factor.
Yeah.
And then I tend to throttle it back a little bit from there, sometimes back 80% or maybe even back all the way to 50% of the concept, and find a happy medium which would give the maximum speed and acceleration coupled with manoeuvrability and functional ease of riding, so to speak, you know?
Yeah.
So as a designer, that's what I tend to do, is with the concept, take it to the extreme and throttle it back. And so with this current evolution, this particular shape, it's all about the subtlety of the elements.
Yeah.
And I've been working with low rockers, where in the past I used to work with really deep, with extreme rockers.
Yeah.
Partly because with deep concaves, when you've got a lot of curve through the initial bottom, and you put a really deep concave through it, you're combining two curves. Like there's one here we should get a look at. If you grab that board, I'll grab this other one. I'll show you what I'm talking about. This one here, this was my absolute favourite board from 1978, 77, 78. I was making stuff like this. So you can see the, I'll get a straight edge.
How's the curve? That's insane. That is psycho.
So coupled with, you can see how much rocker it's got.
Yeah.
And then with this design concept, this is taking things to the extreme. But this was the magic board. I surfed so many board waves on this board.
Really?
When I signed up out of Nana Glen, when we dissolved the partnership, I built half a dozen boards. And this one I've been riding for a year and a half or something already.
Yeah.
And I went up to Bali, rented a house and hung out up there for a while. And this one was just the go-to board. It was the absolute favourite, and it's ridden more waves than perhaps any other board in my lifetime. So you can see the amount of concave that's in it.
That's crazy.
At one point we were using even deeper concaves than that in those 69 boards, which were shorter and shaped like a rocket in the outline with a cut-off tail, a little bit like what I'm doing with the Phaza. But talking about curves, when I shaped this as a flat bottom, I glued the blank up myself, put the appropriate curve into it. When it was a flat bottom, the first cut determines the kind of turning circle of the board, the feel of the turning quality of the board.
Yeah.
And then the concave is a completely different curve, which used to escape a lot of shapers who would see one of these and go, fuck yeah, I'm going to try that. And they'd shape a board, but they'd basically end up just putting in a concave and using the same curve, where one of the secrets to this design is that stringer line is a completely different curve than the turning circle of the rail. That stringer line is as close as what I could get to a parabolic arc, which is maximum curve at the front, and it's getting straighter and straighter and straighter, where through this last section of about that long, it's almost straight. So that curve is a naturally occurring mathematical curve in nature. It appears all over the place. And if you was to stand on a headland and throw a rock, it'll come out, it'll be sort of coming out straight. It'll curve as you throw it, it'll come out and generate more speed. It'll go faster and straighter and faster and straighter, and it'll describe a curve which is a parabolic arc. So it appears a parabolic arc. It appears all through nature, and it's part of what's called the sacred geometry. It appears in satellite dishes all over the shop. And so what it does, water just harmonises with that curve. It can kind of feel it. It's an accelerated curve, and it's where a lot of the speed comes from with this design. And then this one, I could talk for ages.
Well,
I'll try and keep it short.
What about the flex tails and like how, basically, when did you come up with this and start implementing these flex tails on these boards?
Well, this here is very much George Greeno inspired. I was very fortunate to surf with George when he was in his heyday in '68 at Lennox Head.
Yeah.
And he was riding his original velo board, which had the red rail around it. And we were camping out up the beach from Lennox and surfing Lennox a lot. There was a group of us camping out there and hanging out. And George was so far ahead of the game. Like I was actually riding pretty short boards at the time, but they were completely, fairly normal in the shape. They were slightly curved bottoms, slightly bowled entries, short boards nonetheless. But George had this flex thing going. He was able to generate incredible speed and get in and out of the pocket, and it was just clearly evident.
Were they on his knee
On his
boards?
knees.
Yeah.
Clearly evident watching him that he was going way faster than anybody else and able to jam turns at high speed and keep the power on through all his arcs. It wasn't like a stop-start, stalling kind of zigzag turn. He'd kept the power on right through the S's, and I was totally impressed, and it set me on a quest to try and get what he was getting in my stand-up boards. And some of the differences were George took all the fun right out of the guts of his board, and he was a kneeboarder, and he was prepared to swim around virtually and paddle in late takeoffs. So the boards had no paddling volume.
Yeah.
Where I wanted to be able to paddle the board, so I wasn't prepared to sacrifice all that volume.
Yeah.
So I started just working with the flex tail and bringing it up as far as I could, which was to the back of the single fin.
Yeah.
And that actually gave me quite a large surface area. Like that's actually a little bit more surface area than what the fin is.
Right.
And so when you couple the fin flexing, because it's got a similar kind of churn flex to the tail, those two things flexing at once, it opened up another level of what I could do with my surfing, and also with a solid version of the very same shape. They went really good, and I could turn them and do what I wanted. But with flex, I found with this board I could just jam it vertical off the bottom, because it would allow the tail to create a variable curve. So there's a lot of science in this whole concept, and there's been years of development in it. So the things that make the board work is variable curve. So there's been very few boards through the millennia, well, I'm not aware of too much else apart from what I've been doing, where it's a variable curve. So while you're riding the board, it can change its form.
Yeah.
You look at birds and fish, and they can do that. You look at a bird, and it'll be flying along, and they're about hunting. They want to eat prey, and you'll see a seabird flying along with its wings out, soaring and looking at the ocean. When it spots what it wants to catch, it folds its wings in, flattens its foil out. All of a sudden it's doing about 3 times its original cruising speed, and it's just going super fast, and it's heading straight down to a little fish, everything tucked back. It'll catch that fish, and as it comes out, it changes its form to a different type of curvature in the wings, and it can do all that kind of stuff. So there's a bird in motion.
Yeah.
Now the big gift that I got from George, apart from looking at his boards and getting the idea of flex, was one day on the beach we're hanging out, and George caught this small tuna, and there it was, still pretty much alive and kicking on the beach. And I walked down, I was talking to him about fins and stuff, and he's gone, have a look at this. And he walked me through what all the various fins do on this fish. And the tail fin in particular is where George's famous Greeno fin comes from. It's that tail fin which is quite vertical and scimitar shaped, and that's responsible for a lot of the propulsion on a fish. And the other, on the forward part of the fish, it's got these little little fins that protrude out here like little arms.
Yeah.
And he was saying, yeah, when the fish is hunting, when it wants to go flat out, like the bird, it sort of pulls its foil in and it tucks those side fins in completely flat. And he pointed out on the fish, there's these little recesses, like little dents on the side of its body where they could tuck in. So it was completely clean laminar flow when it was maxing at high speed.
Whoa.
And then it's hunting a smaller fish, and the nature's way is the smaller fish uses manoeuvrability to save itself. With the bigger fish, it's got more power and speed. So the smaller fish can turn really fast. So the bigger fish needs to try and turn really quick too. So the tuna, it's flying along, and when it wants to, the little fish changes direction really fast. The tuna puts these side fins out, executes a right angle turn, and also all its other fins, it can control all its fins while it's in motion. So that is the quest. That's been my quest for a long, long time, is to create a surfboard which can change its form while it's in motion.
I love that you've been inspired by like animals and nature and things that we're surrounded by, and especially things that are like in the ocean as well.
Totally, yeah.
Like referring back to.
Well, that's been the quest, and outside of like where George uses the flex in his board is kind of the opposite of mine, and there was only so much that I could employ from George's original concepts. But the real gift was that lesson that he gave me in natural species and the way they work, and that's been my guiding star, if you will, all through the years, because with these sort of designs, as I've come up with new ideas and implemented them, there's been nowhere to look for, to copy, to say, oh, that's how you do it, because no one was doing it. So I've had to pioneer things for myself, and where it all comes from for me is from nature, the birds and the fish in particular.
That's really cool.
And
what year was this board made again?
This one's a 70. I think I made it in late 77, and I surfed it a real lot right through 78 in this North Coast region, because I used to live up there at Nana Glen, out from Coffs through that period, all through the 70s.
Yeah.
And then when I took this one to Bali in 79, this was my go-to board, and I surfed. Man, we had the most epic season at Sanua, where it never stopped breaking for a whole month, right through the wet season.
Wow.
And it never got under about head height. It got for about a serious 8 foot. It doesn't get any taller than that. It just gets kind of thicker.
Yeah.
And this was just the magic board.
Wow.
I surfed it like every day right through that whole month of swell, and some of the old timers, expats that were hanging out there, reckoned it was the all-time Sanua season. So
that's really cool.
So that was the magic board, and one is not here at the moment. I loaned it out recently for an exhibition, which fills in a gap with the evolution of what I do with flex. And you could keep me here for hours. You get me in the right mood. I've got a lot to talk about. From here, I went into a whole nother tangent of flex, and when new materials have arrived, like I used to keep in touch off and on with George, and he kind of turned me on to carbon fibre originally, because he was using it before anybody else that I knew in surfboards.
Yeah.
And we talked about that and how he was implementing it. So I started replacing the fiberglass with carbon fibre in my tails, and then I started playing around with rail bands to control the flex.
Yeah.
And then again, keeping an eye on materials which I still do when new things turn up. Some of it comes out of aerospace, which is what happened with carbon fibre that came out of the aerospace program.
Yeah.
And then the boogie boards turned up, and it took me a while to twig. I was looking at those things going, now fuck yeah, that is a material which I can put to use. So to create this shape, I've had to sculpt out about 10% of the volume of the foam.
Yeah.
And once you're up and riding, it wasn't an issue. But for paddling and getting around, you noticed it. That's why this board has such a flat deck and blocky rails.
Yeah.
Partly because of the super deep concave. This was the only place I could hold some volume in the board.
So, did you gain inspiration from bodyboards?
Well, the material itself,
Yeah.
the EVA foam,
Yeah.
I looked at it and I thought, fuck yeah, I can put that back in here where I've taken out all this foam,
Yeah.
and it's got roughly the same buoyancy as the PU foam inside the board.
Right.
So by putting that in here, I was able to restore the foil to its original line before I did all the sculptural work to create flex. And so it did two things. It restored the foil, and it made the board less dangerous perhaps looking because it wasn't such a blade,
Yeah.
and also it restored the volume to what it originally was.
I see.
So that was a huge blessing.
Wow. So in this part of the board here, basically you'd pretty much like dissect parts of a bodyboard and pack it in here.
Yeah,
Is that what you mean?
yeah,
Wow.
exactly. EVA foam, put it in there. I sourced out where I could buy the stuff rather than slicing up boogie boards, but that's where the inspiration came from, was from that new material, which
Wow.
prior to then wasn't available. And then that opened up areas of what I could do, because around that period was when Simon's thrusters kind of revolutionised fins, and I was a bit late coming on board with that.
Yeah.
Hey, Lindy.